Welcome to the new episode of Voices of Plaksha, the signature series, which is hosted by Center for Thinking, Language and Communication and Plaksha University. Today with us, we have Dr. Vasudha Chopra with us, who is Assistant Professor in Plaksha University. First of all, welcome to this particular podcast, ma'am. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Professor Chopra, it's really great to have you with us today. And before we go into any of your subjects or research which you are teaching or you're pursuing, I want to know and understand how were your early years, your child? What was childhood like? I want to know how your initial academic intervention which you had in your early childhood days, how did those particular interventions shaped you as an individual, as a person right now?
So I love to talk about my childhood because it was like really fun. My father owns a travel company, and we used to get to travel a lot, and that basically put wheels under my feet also. And I think as an individual, so I was raised by two very different people. My father, he loves to work, but he also loves to enjoy all the little things. My mother, she's very disciplined, hardworking. So of course, hard work was one of the common themes, and we both, me and my brother, we kind of inherited all of that. But most of all, we inherited discipline, which up until this point, I think I've held up very nicely. So as an individual, I think two factors or two things that describe me: A is discipline, and B, I really want to think about how I make others feel. At least that's the goal. So empathy has been imbibed from the childhood.
So as a child, what were you majorly most curious about as a kid?
Oh. I think travel. Yeah. So basically, just exploring new places, going to used to go to these churches, different temples. I mean, of course, as a very young child, I would get irritated because why are we going to these temples? It's so hot and all of that. But as I started to grow up, I kind of really liked the architecture, the history, the stories behind everything. And so I think that storytelling, right? That was something that was that made me very curious about just seeing places.
So in Plaksha, you are serving as assistant professor for economics, and at some point, I do believe economics entered your life. And of course, not just as a subject, but as a way of thinking and perceiving world. So what was that particular point when you realized that I want to see and vision the world through the lens of economics, not just as a very vague thing anymore?
So it's a very funny story actually, and I don't know, maybe other people's story is much more serious, but for me, funnily, so of course I had gone into commerce, so it was a decision which was like elimination of choices. I don't want to do science, you're not allowed to take arts, so of course the compromise is commerce. So sab log aise, everyone went into commerce, and somehow everyone was very sure they had to do BCom. The first day we were asked, 11th standard, day 1, what do you want to do? BCom honors. And like 99% of the class raised their hands. And I was like, how do these people know? Are they even thinking about it? How did they decide? I didn't know what to do. But over the course of that 11th grade, so one of my seniors who was in 12th, they had their board exams and they had economics too. Okay, so they were struggling a lot with econ. And they asked me, hey, can you teach me 12th standard econ? And I said, I'm in 11th. I don't know if I can teach you, but just to help out a friend, I started reading 12th standard textbooks. And, for 1 month, I actually taught them 12th standard econ, and they scored so well. So funnily, it was just the fact that I could understand one grade above, the level of econ. And then I think 12th standard econ is very interesting. It's like tells you about demand, supply, how individuals make decisions. And it's just a fun process relative to 11th. So I think it was a leap, and that made me feel a little bit of nudge towards this field. And I guess I was sure that this is something I want to learn about. So I ended up choosing econ honors, right? And then throughout my career, I stayed loyal, went into masters in econ, and then ultimately PhD.
So, I think that very initial curious factor in your mind later on led to the whole doctoral degree itself.
Right, which I didn't know it would culminate into this.
So, when you were pursuing your PhD, what was the real world challenge which was somewhere in your mind which you wanted to address somewhere? Was it something which you wanted
I'll tell you the core reason of why. So I went into masters. Masters tak, it was like I liked econ and I liked doing and I liked studying before I would ever enter into a job type of situation. So in the second year of masters, and this was at Terry University, it was called back then, now Terry School of Advanced Sciences. So there was a lot of focus on sustainability, right? That's just the motto of the school, and of course we all the students imbibed that kind of trait. That our bend is towards sustainability, obviously. But one thing, we got introduced to research, like academic research in Terry, in my master's in second year, which today, you know, undergrads actually know about research. So I was sure that I love teaching. I want to do something with research. And so it was like PhD was a natural next step, right? But there was one other reason. I think in my head, and I think it's very real, people just tend to take you more seriously when you have this professor or doctor in front of your name.
Right.
So for me, it was very clear that I could do those things. I could go into the field and work and, you know, create solutions, everyday solutions. But I think people will take me more seriously when I have this title. I mean, as titles go, right? They make you, they make you receive that type of respect, I think. And I think I'm right about that. But ultimately, started PhD because of that, but ultimately realized that I really love teaching. I really, really love teaching. And, you know, when students come to you and they're like, oh, ma'am, you explained this so well, and, you know, thank you. And that kind of, that gives you a set of satisfaction. You're changing someone's life, you're helping them. And then research in itself, it's challenging, but I think good research, good quality research, ultimately is going to help the society.
What I also found very interesting in your whole journey is that you started with certain discipline of economics, but you built up on like behavioral, environmental, and organizational, and even developmental for that particular thing.
A little.
So, like on the surface, these all seem like very different things, but they all are binded together with the same notion somewhere.
Yeah.
So, how do you see that continuity in research, like level by level up? Like, how did you keep on growing in this particular field?
Right. So, you know, again, it started from my master's. We had wonderful professors, and at the time, Terry was, I mean, they were all professors from top institutes, you know. So, we got to learn a lot from good people. And then somehow, I didn't really know it, but I did an internship which led into my master's thesis. So, there I actually went out to the field and collected field data. Okay, so that is, I mean, I didn't know it, but that was basically a field survey or a field experiment at a very small scale, of course, because we were constrained with resources. But I think I was stepping into this already, and I just didn't know it because in masters you don't always go into in-depth about every elective, right? So when I went into my PhD, it started, I mean, of course, timing is everything, right? So second year start, I take up this course, experimental and behavioral economics. And honestly, I've always been different, in the sense that I've always wanted to think about questions that people just run away from, or like, I'm not a conformist, okay? So I am different, and I also want to be flexible to different ideas. I think that nature of mine led me into behavioral. Like, I really loved questioning, why do we behave this way? Why do people behave this way? Why don't people act like the theories in econ say we should act like? We act different, okay? So I think that was the reason I went into all of this.
Actually, that very much was my follow-up question, because you teach behavioral economics specifically in Plaksha University, and these things like incentives, behavior are something which are very much present around us within people only, but we don't even question and discuss or even want to know somewhere. But now, since you are somewhere an expert, and you are an expert, of course, how do you see these things on day-to-day basis in people? Like, if I just ask you, what do you observe about my behavior or something like that, how would you do that? Like, what's the lens which you bring in?
So I think one of the ways to think about this is that we don't question our habits every day, okay? How do these habits form? Like, for example, if I have paid, I guess, 20,000 rupees for a gym, for a very nice gym, I go there once or twice because I've been motivated by some external factor, and maybe I saw a movie, maybe something happened in my life, maybe I talked to someone who was really motivating, and that time I have this adrenaline rush, right? So I take a decision out of that rush, and that decision is a long-term decision, but ultimately I'm not sticking to it. So why am I not sticking to it? Why am I paying the money? So the money is gone from my pocket, but I'm still not sticking to it. It has to do with habits. It has to do with a lot of us being human and not just a rational economic agent. So observing these kinds of things about your own behavior. I'll also give you another example. Our society is based on judgment a lot.
Yeah.
And I mean, the first thing when I see something different, so like, again, we all want to be conformists so that we get accepted in the society. But one person or something you see different about the person, the first thing is, oh, why are they doing this? Our mind does that automatically. It's like a switch, but we don't go one step further and ask, okay, why did I do that? Why did I judge that person without knowing anything about that person, right? Maybe the way they dress, or maybe the way they color their hair, just giving you examples. So I think these things, this is how I have become different, is even if my mind operates that way, being a part of the society, I always go one step ahead and question, why did I think this? Is this the right way to think about things? And I think this is one thing, if I was able to pass down to my students, I think that would be great. This, and of course, time discipline, although today I have no one to talk about it, but like, yeah.
Professor Plaksha University also brings different disciplines like economics, humanities, or any other particular discipline into action very lively. Why do you think students who are pursuing engineering, they should have that particular viewpoint to pursue world from an economic point of view as well? What was the need of introducing behavioral economics, especially for engineers?
Right. I mean, again, a great question. See, engineers build systems, right? They build everything around us, and humans are the ones who are using that. So I think if we don't understand human behavior, the knickknacks and everything that theory doesn't tell us, things that we just explore, ultimately those systems are going to fail, right? Because we are the ones who are using it. So let's say there is a new technology that comes up, right? Even AI, I mean, something that's disrupting everything these days. If AI was not built in a way that humans are able to easily use it, it would fail. We would not be able to get the value out of it, right? So I think engineering, science in this case, and economics, all of this has to go hand in hand. The society has to make sure that both of them understand each other. We engineers build systems that humans can use based on their behavioral traits. And of course, we as economists have that space for engineers to design systems for us, right? So I think our discipline has to be open to the other discipline.
Also, when engineers in a very casual and a very normal way, when they design systems or any particular model, I think they're also designing incentives. They're also designing behavior side by side.
Right.
So how do you allow them, and how do you help them to recognize those pattern or intersection of engineering and these particular economics pattern going hand in hand together?
So I think we can look at it from an example. Let's say that, again, I can take AI because that seems to be the most popular thing, and something that is being used at scale. So recently there was a talk that, and every talk that starts with AI, they think about the costs of AI, always talk about how expensive it is to use, right? It is energy, it uses a lot of energy. They literally called AI thirsty for water, even though water is recyclable and all of that. But there is no doubt that it uses up a lot of resources. So I think, and the way to think about this is, engineers don't always think of resources as the constraint. It's more like physical constraints, right? Which of course we all know that there are laws of physics and there are constraints to the world, but there are also resource constraints that we must think about. See, all this resource that is going into using AI, into producing AI and using AI, that could have been used somewhere else, right? So, for example, that could have been used to improve healthcare. So, when economists think about cost, we also think about opportunity cost. And I think one thing that at least I try to whenever I teach my courses is tell students that, okay, if we didn't use this money here or this resource here, what else can we do? So I think thinking about opportunity costs is somewhere where we know we can connect the two, and it is an important thing because we have limited resources, and that's all why we study economics. There's scarcity, right? So I think it is important.
So also when majority of our students who take admission in the university, they come from a technical background studying physics, chemistry, maths and everything. And they are not keeping in mind somewhere that economics is some of the subject which will be taught to us initially in the first year. So when you teach them in their first year itself, what's that one particular vision you keep in mind entering into the class? How do you want them to perceive economic as a subject?
So one of the things that I've noticed is that students will obviously question a lot of assumptions, and that's okay. A standard econ student has, grown up learning those assumptions. Marginal cost is always increasing, things like that. Law of demand, there are very few exceptions and all of that. But I think that with engineers, what I've noticed, and I have taught previously also engineers in the other university. So I think what I've noticed is that they have a very hard time accepting those assumptions, which is fine. So what I tell them is that, ultimately, see, we are using these assumptions to get started. Okay. Some of these are actually empirically tested. We do question them. But if we don't have these assumptions, right, we are not gonna be able to formalize a model, formalize a fundamental relationship between two variables, right? So I tell them that, okay, let's question it. Let me also show you some empirical data that some of these assumptions do hold. And the second thing I try to do is that, okay, this is a starting point. I'll show you some models, and this is something that I don't always do in the fundamentals, but in my more higher level courses, which is the electives, what I do is, okay, let's start with a very simple model, thousands of assumptions. Let's try and relax one of the assumptions, and let's look at more realistic and more frontier kind of models. So I think that journey helps them. That helps them a little bit.
Was there any classroom moment or any particular anecdote where you found out that students have linked the whole engineering mindset to the economic reasoning and everything?
I do have one of my ILGC teams working with me, and now we are working on something where we are trying to solve an economic and social problem, which is the problem of food waste on campus. And the way we are doing it is using tools that using AI as well as other tools from computer science. So the fun in this is that we are able to combine both fields. We are able to solve a problem in econ by using a tool from this particular field. So at least for CSA and DSEB, where there are natural interdependencies, I see students using these tools and figuring out problems and then trying to solve those problems.
So basically, I believe in ILGC they are solving real world grand challenges.
That's the whole idea of ILGC, right? Solving real world challenges using what you have learned, and they are actually trying to bring two disciplines together, at least them.
So when students hear the term behavioral economics for the first time in their first year itself, I believe, so how do you explain, or let's say define this term to anyone? Like if I have to understand this term in a very normal and in a very layman language, how do you define it, like in a very intuitive way?
Okay, so good question. Okay, see, I'll tell you one thing funny about behavioral economics is that it's a very it's a fun term. It sounds like you're going to do something creative and fun. That's what attracts you about it. And it is true, you are going to do that, except you're going to like beat your head 1,000 times if you're the researcher. But very simply, if I had to say, it's just like, okay, let's say I care a lot about the environment. Okay, and I try to do everything, like basically I want to do everything possible to help the environment. That is my intention. Okay, but in reality, I'm choosing to use a car even for a 500-meter distance when I could have walked. I mean, there are multiple ways, right? But because I'm so used to using my car, it's a habit that I've created. I will choose to use my car and not go the other way. My mind will not think in terms of that. So the action that I'm taking is very different from my intention, right? So one of the big questions in this literature is intent-action gap. Why does the intent-action gap exist? when you ask people, oh yeah, of course, I would love to help people, then you go and ask for some money for charity. Even if it's a trusted charity, let's remove all the scams and all the problems with it, right? They're not going to pay. There is some reason behind it. So the way I explain it to students is, and this is, I mean, not the proper definition, but like, humans behave in a way that is not expected from what theory says, right? So they are sometimes different. We just want to explore through this subject, why are they different? What's causing that difference? I mean, there could be a plethora of reasons. It could be emotions. It could be social norms, right? So norms make you, maybe in the society, the norm is that, oh yeah, you should be helping people. Then you will go ahead and help more than you're supposed to, right? So some people over contribute, some people under contribute, they free ride. There can be a lot of reasons for this. That is what we investigate. Right? But what's the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is to bring into psychology a theory of unified human behavior. I'll tell you an analogy of this, right? In physics, we say that we want this one equation that explains everything in the universe, right? A unified theory that explains everything, a simple one. That's exactly what we are after, except it is so tough because we are dealing with people with very different brains, right? I mean, brain scientists haven't been able to understand the brain fully. So that's when they use invasive methods, and we are just the ones who are just observing people's behavior, right? We cannot really get inside a person's head. But at least over decades of research, we're able to figure out what are the common themes of why people deviate from the behavior. And I think that is something we're after. We're just after understanding people, simply understanding humans.
And I think once you start thinking that way, there's no going back, especially in the field of sustainability and consumption.
Yeah, consumption.
And I think fast fashion is a very big example of it. Like, even though there's a huge environmental awareness in regard to it, but there's still no actual result which people can see out there. What's your opinion on this thing?
Yeah, so I think, see, capitalism, consumption, all of this, our economy drives on it because there was one economist who about 200 years ago, or maybe like 150 years ago, came up with the concept of GDP, right? Oh, GDP is the one that we are after. It started from there, right? And that is how we measure. So everything for us, growth is only in terms of objective measurables, right? GDP is the biggest factor that we care about, biggest economic outcome that we care about. And so that drove the whole capitalism kind of a concept which we have today, which ultimately means that you're over consuming. If you over consume, your economy is going to grow, right? But are we really thinking of the costs of consumption? Not everyone is thinking. So fast fashion is a very good example because, you know, it basically creates this very nice trade-off. Is that fast fashion is by definition cheaper than a more sustainable or slow fashion, right? And slow fashion, I just mean sustainably made. So it takes time and it is more expensive. So of course, what does law of demand say? Anything that's going to be cheaper and that you like, I guess we all like new clothes, assuming that we are going to buy a lot of it.
Is that the only reason why fast fashion is very behavioral compelling thing out there?
Right, it is, right? Because if you really think about how humans behave, they are, with fast fashion, they are absolutely on point, law of demand, right? Look at Zudio. Zudio is the most perfect example. They have undercut even Chinese products at this point. So that means cost is so low, cost of production, cost of selling is so low, right? And so we are going to buy like 1,000 pair of shoes because it's going to cost me the same as investing in like 5 very good pair of shoes, right? And it's going to cause a lot of clutter. We don't think about all of that until we are in that position. But we're going to buy a lot. This is all incentives, like incentives that matter, money, right? Everything that matters. But on the other side, the real cost of all of this fast fashion is not baked into the price. Fast fashion and a lot of industries that only care, like they operate on capitalism, they are going with this cradle to grave kind of process, right? So this is, I mean, a little more technical, but the idea is they only factor in the costs of from day one of production until the product is sold.
Hmm.
After that, what happens to the product, the costs to the environment, the cost to the society, cost of recycling potentially, all of that is not baked into the price because all of that is being borne by other people out there. Right? Think about workers in Adidas. We've heard stories of other brands also where they're working in inhuman conditions. Where is the cost of their health? What about the pollution that is being caused by these industries, which ultimately means that there are health costs for people who are potentially buying these products? Right? So health costs, inhuman conditions, costs of that labor working in those conditions, all that is not factored in. If we had to factor it in, just imagine that 400 or 300 rupees shoe in Zudio would have probably costed 1500 rupees. So then it's not fast fashion anymore, right? Then it's actually competitive with slow fashion. So I think behaviorally, this is a very nice thing to study, is that your intent, my intent also, is that I want to help the environment. I want to do something good for the environment as much as I can. And on the other side, there's fast fashion. I like to buy clothes, so then I would go and buy this 300 rupee t-shirt, and the real cost of it on the environment is probably 1500.
Right.
And just look at mass consumption. So just multiply that by India's population, and I mean that's how much cost we are placing on other people.
So beyond the price tag, if I say, there's always a thing like brands. There's also a thing like identity, trend,
Right.
and even social signaling for that particular cause. Ki people want to wear or something
I
like
agree.
that. So how do these different factors motivate people to choose these things which are actually not sustainable, and how do they?
So I think with brand, it depends, right? So there are two types of brand these days I see. One is the big brands who have they have created their identity, right? And they're actually a social symbol, like a status symbol, sorry. Let's say Louis Vuitton and these kinds of brands. Again, I don't want to name any brands really, but like the big brands that are elite, exclusive, and have made their mark, right? It's a social symbol. So for those, I still think the value, the price is very high, obviously. So that can't be considered as fast fashion, technically, with respect to price. But a lot of the value in the price is actually brand value. So you don't really know what is their cost of production, actually, right? So that's one thing. So that is one segment. The other segment is where the price is still high, except the value is not the brand value, really. It's going to the person who is making. So the artisans are paid very well. I mean, I have some friends in this industry who they're making bags, they're using sustainable leather, and they're of course expensive, except the value is going to the right person, right? People who are actually using their sweat and their time and their art to create something for you. So I think their brand building is slow. It's expensive, but it's probably more sustainable. It takes time, right? So the longer time it takes to make a product, of course it's going to be more expensive because of the time value of money, but that's also going to be sustainable, right? It's not easy to mass produce that,
right?
We don't have that many people to make. So I think with brand it works a little differently, and people who choose the slow fashion brand where of course the money is going to the right person, they're actually moving towards sustainability, whether they know it or not.
Okay.
But people who are choosing brands where most of the price share is going into the pockets of the CEO, I mean, that's not sustainable. That's not going to help anyone. So that section is probably not aware that even though they're not technically buying fast fashion, it still may not be helping.
And I think this comes with a cost which we don't initially see, but like environmental damage or long-term consequences.
Exactly.
So
we don't see
are
that.
there any micro solutions which people can inherit and work on and then use it?
I think that for me, it's very easy because I do have friends in this space. So I know about these brands, right? I think homegrown brands, India is now finally getting into that trend of homegrown brands. So on Instagram, I see like stories, narratives behind brands that actually they talk about where their resources come from. They're very transparent. I have some friends in both in the clothing and in the, this leather bags kind of business, where they're talking about how much slow fashion matters to them. And I think, the real micro solution for us is we want to spend time. We want to take just 15 minutes of our time to do some background research into the brands we are buying. Some cost, like not just going up to a mall and buying like 10 things because I can. So one micro solution is this: we have to find time, because there has to be something that you are spending, uh, from whether it's your money or your time, you're investing something to be able to be sustainable. So I think this is something we all have to do if it's important to us, obviously. If it's not important to anyone, then there's no forcing anyone, right? So that's all okay. That's one thing we can do. I think moving beyond fast fashion, there are other things in everyday life that we can do, right? Just giving an example of food waste again, because this is something that, as I said, I want to treat Plaksha as a living laboratory. Right now, we are just only getting started.
Right.
But with food waste, I think that problem is close to my heart. And what we are doing with one of the ILGC teams is we are trying to use, as I said, both AI as well as some kind of technology to hopefully change this. But one of the things that works very well, with food waste, is that you reduce the plate size.
Okay.
Right? Because the number of times that you are going to refill your plate is generally not going to be that much. So if you reduce your plate size, even when people are not aware, they will still take less food, right? So this is not about changing the choices. And that's where I'll kind of come to a distinction between just taking away the choice altogether and just nudging, just gently nudging, right? So we are saying that, okay, you can refill your plate up to 10 times or how many ever times based on how hungry you are. However, it induces those people who end up taking a lot more food because they overestimate their hunger. At least for those people, I mean, even if it does this in 100 people in the university, just imagine over a month how much food you could save. Right? So how much wastage you could reduce. So I think there are these micro solutions. They exist. We just have to identify them and tell people about it.
So when we talk about things like impulse buying and then food wastage, as you suggested and talked about, what do you think it is majorly influenced by? Is it like individual choice, or is it like the environment in which we are living, or our surroundings? What is it majorly influenced by?
So that's a very tough question to answer, and I think that is an empirical one, but it's both. It's both because norms matter, right? So norms in the sense that, if a person doesn't wear different clothes every day, then it's like, do they not have enough money? Do they not have enough resources to actually go and buy clothes? Why are they always in the same clothes? Like, you're kind of looked down upon.
Right.
I mean, I think this is something we all can agree with. And so there are some trends by certain celebrities and also like, other influencers where they're like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna reuse this one dress like 15 times. There was literally this one very unique case where I was also kind of very inspired. There was a woman who wore a dress for a whole year, the same dress, right? So she had just one, and of course that means she had to, of course, wash it multiple times and take care of it properly. But then she's like, I want to see if it's possible, and it is possible. You could have just 5 clothes and you could just reuse it and take care of it. You could invest in very high quality clothes, still spending some money, but maybe it lasts for a long time. And because social norms matter, right? If you see someone in the same clothes every day, then you do see that look coming from people.
Right.
And that can influence your decision a little bit. Or it's just completely personal that, I want to create a new look every day. And I think it's just easier to buy a 200 rupees t-shirt and do that. Right?
I think
so it's
this
both.
is where nudge theory becomes fascinating, actually.
Right.
So how do you draw that line where you can very gently guide a person to take a choice, or taking a choice as a altogether, like totally?
Right. So I mean, that's the perfect follow up to what I was saying, is that so this, in the literature we call it a push versus a nudge. Right? A push is something where you just force someone, which means you've taken away the choice altogether, and a nudge is where you gently just guide behavior, but you're not forcing anyone, right? So of course, with one versus the other, a freedom of action has been taken away a little bit, freedom of choice, which obviously is our right. And I think these days, of course, economics assumes that the more choices you have, the better you're going to be. That may or may not be true really for everyone. However, in some cases, pushes are actually better. So I'll just tell you, nudges are good where we are trying to correct behavior from the social standpoint, where people are just not able to do the right thing because of biases. So let's say I'm not paying attention, or I have some emotion, or there is some kind of norm set in the society because of which I'm not able to do the right thing. Okay, so let's say I have this habit of waking up late, and maybe that's why I'm not going to the gym, right? And someone just nudges me. So then nudges are great. Or to give you another like really nice example, I love this one, is that we go to a supermarket, and we have a bunch of choices there to buy food. Of course, I can buy chips if I want, like fried stuff if I want, processed things, or I can buy something healthy, right? Now, one really cool experiment that was done, think it was Sweden, I'm not sure, but was that, just changing the location of certain types of food, whether it's in your hand's reach versus whether you have to ask someone to actually bring it down from a top shelf, that changes people's behavior, like actual choices.
Okay.
So in a market, in a store, basically, the experiment was that all the fried stuff and the unhealthy processed stuff was put on the very top shelf. You can't reach it. And because people are lazy, right? So this being lazy and just asking someone is just too much work. They ended up buying whatever was in hand's reach, and that was all healthy stuff, soups and things like that. Okay. So the whole idea is that nudges are nice. See, you're not taking away the choice. If you want to buy that Lay's packet, you can ask someone, so you're not taking away the choice. You're just nudging them and using human behavior traits like being lazy to do the right thing, which is to choose healthy options. Because we consider healthy eating as the right thing from the social standpoint. But where does a push work, right? A push works where private incentives are actually opposed to societal good, right? Okay. So think about pollution, whether it's coming from the fast fashion industry or whether it's coming from like, the chemical industry, wherever, agriculture, pollution. So think about firms polluting. Now, if I just go to, a firm and say, I think you should pay taxes on your pollution, and I don't enforce it, do you ever think they're going to pay taxes? They're never going to pay taxes unless there is enforcement, right? Because it's actually opposed to their objective function, which is maximizing profits. If I just nudge them that, hey, you're going to, I think it's a good thing to pay taxes. No, you're never going to see even one dime in tax revenue. However, if you enforce it, you literally force people to pay because this is a right thing, except in this case, you just have to force, and only then it will work, right? So nudges do end up working sometimes without forcing people. But in some cases, like collecting taxes and using it for the better of the society, I think the government has to go for a push kind of a situation. So it's not one versus the other. It's like which context is suitable for what type of action.
So taking all these examples and everything, all this knowledge together, and if we try to loaf this whole thing over our engineering students, what's one thing, since they're designing, they're innovating every day.
Yeah.
So what one thing they should take responsibility of while designing their outcomes or anything for a long-term impact period?
Right. So see, one of the things is that we invest in the right kind of materials. Let's say we are just talking about designing a building, right? I mean, we design it in a way that it lasts for a very long time. Look at roads these days. They are designed not with this thinking in mind. And there's a reason, right? There is an incentive for that contractor to get the contract every year. How are they going to get the contract every year? Only if the road has wear and tear and proper wear and tear. So they're going to use low quality material. Same with engineers, right? If we are building something, and I'm not talking only about building like physical structures, but I mean, these days we are building robots, drones, things like that. If we think about building things in a way that it lasts for a long time, and the second thing, if let's say we are building even an AI, right? How to design error messages so that people understand. Maybe we are building a new software. I mean, all these things actually will affect how people end up using it, right? So, for example, there is this one software that we use in experimental coding, where there's not a lot of help available on even through StatList and all. When AI did not exist, that's what we used to go to, and not a lot of help was available. And the issue that was it was really frustrating because the error messages were so complicated to understand. So as a designer, right, whether you're designing a building, designing a software, whatever you're designing, I think keeping human behavior in mind, what is the easiest for the person? How can I give the most amount of information in less amount of words, but the right information? I think all this is very important. So if the students here were able to understand design in a way that caters to human needs, I think that any technology, any software, that would be a hit.
And the final question which I want to ask you is that to all the students who are watching this particular episode about economics, or even engineering students who want to pursue economics somewhere in their life, or let's say students within our university itself, do you have any particular message, like if they have made a choice of choosing economics as an additional discipline in their life, how they should carry it forward?
Yeah, I think I can sum it up with one sentence. This is the common thread through everything that I've talked about, is that behavior is the only thing I feel is missing in a lot of technical solutions. And so since we are prepping the next generation of engineers, and that too in a very different way, in a very unique way that Plaksha is doing, I think if engineers were to understand these biases, behavioral biases, and incentives facing a human being, I think they could become better designers, and their solutions would help like millions. So I think that.
Professor Chopra, this has been a very wonderful conversation. And I just not only learned about economics, but how our daily life choices make us live with their consequences later on. Thank you very much for joining us on this particular episode. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you, Saurabh.